The Council of Galactic Species had seen it all. Thousands of civilizations had come and gone, many of them too weak to stand against the weight of time and space. The Council was made up of the strongest and oldest species in the galaxy, each one proud of their power, their advanced technology, and their history of dominance. Earth was nothing more than a speck on the map, a young, primitive species barely out of its own atmosphere. Humans were unpredictable, fragile, and weak. Their ships were clunky, their weapons outdated, and their technology laughable compared to the wonders of the Council races. It had taken them centuries to get to space, and even longer to make contact with the wider galaxy. Their history was one of conflict and survival, constantly fighting amongst themselves, unable to unite. Surely, the Council thought, they would never be a real threat. They could barely protect their own planet, let alone challenge the might of the galactic powers. The meeting chamber of the Council was massive, a grand, sterile space where representatives from all over the galaxy came together to make decisions about the future. Above them, the stars twinkled as holographic images of distant systems floated in midair. Each species in the room was unique. Some had bodies of liquid, others were made of shifting energy, while others still resembled towering, insected creatures. The Council had seen many species come and go. Some had come to offer their knowledge, others had come to seek help or to be welcomed into the fold. But all had one thing in common: they had acknowledged the power and wisdom of the Council. Earth, though, was different. Earth had dared to ask for membership. The message had come through a simple transmission, a request for diplomatic recognition and a seat at the table. At first, it was ignored, just another request from another minor species. But when the humans persisted, when they began to send delegations and ambassadors, the Council began to take notice. Their presence was enough to spark a debate. Should Earth be allowed to join the Council? It was a debate that quickly turned into mockery. "How ridiculous," said the High Speaker of the Eruvians, a race of tentacled beings known for their psionic abilities. "This species can barely control its own planet. They've been at war with themselves for centuries. Why should we even consider them?" The Eruvian's words echoed in the chamber. His many limbs swayed as he spoke, his voice dripping with disdain. The other members of the Council nodded in agreement, their expressions grim. Even the normally silent Tijar, a race of towering, insect-like beings, seemed amused by the idea. The Tijar were known for their biological prowess, their ships made of living flesh, and their near invulnerability to harm. To them, humans were nothing more than ants. The Esthal, a race of beings with immense psychic abilities, were the only ones who showed any hint of curiosity. "Perhaps they are not as weak as we think," said the Esthal leader, his voice a low hum like a distant thunderstorm. "Perhaps they have something we don't understand." But even his caution was easily dismissed. "What could they possibly have that we don't already possess?" asked the High Speaker of the Eruvians. "A few primitive weapons? Their technology is centuries behind ours. They're nothing but a distraction." The debate raged on, each member of the Council dismissing Earth as irrelevant. To them, the humans were a nuisance, a species too small and too weak to even be worth considering. But there was one voice that no one had expected. The voice of the human ambassador. The ambassador was a young woman named Captain Rachel Hawk. She stood in front of the Council, a single figure among giants, her stance steady, her eyes full of determination. She had come to the Council not to beg, not to ask for pity, but to demand respect. "We may not have the technology you have or the centuries of history you boast about," she began, her voice clear and strong. "But we are a species that has survived against all odds. We've been on the brink of destruction many times, but each time we've found a way to rise. We're not the biggest, we're not the strongest, but we are relentless." The Council watched in silence as she spoke. The words were simple, but there was a fire in her eyes that few could ignore. She continued, her words now carrying the weight of a promise. "We are not here to ask for your mercy. We are here to show you that we belong. To show you that we can stand with you, not as your subordinates, but as equals." A quiet tension filled the chamber. The Council members exchanged looks, some skeptical, others intrigued. But before anyone could respond, the High Speaker of the Eruvians broke the silence with a sneer. "How amusing! You would have us believe that your species, fragile, divided, barely out of the dust of your homeworld, could ever be anything more than a nuisance to the mighty forces of the galaxy." Captain Hawk's jaw tightened, but she did not flinch. "You'll see," she said quietly. "You'll see soon enough." The Council laughed, the sound rippling through the chamber like a distant storm. They had made their decision. Earth would remain outside the Council, just another small, insignificant planet in the vast universe. The day after the Council's decision, a fleet of Aruvian warships entered Earth's solar system. Their purpose was clear: to send a message, to show humanity their place in the grand scheme of things. The Aruvians weren't just sending a message to Earth's leaders. They were sending a message to the entire galaxy. The humans had been foolish to challenge the power of the Council. The Aruvian fleet arrived in full force, their massive ships, built for speed and destruction, descending toward Earth with all the might of an ancient empire. The humans had no chance, they thought. Their ships were outdated, their defenses weak. A quick strike would make an example of them. But what the Council did not know, what the Aruvians did not know, was that Earth had been playing nice. The Aruvian fleet entered Earth's solar system with the grace and arrogance of an ancient predator hunting its prey. Their ships were sleek and terrifying, giant, crescent-shaped vessels that seemed to slice through space with ease, their glowing energy cores pulsing like the heartbeat of a death machine. The humans had no idea what was coming. They had no idea what waited for them in the dark expanse of space. Captain Rachel Hawke, though, knew something the Council had overlooked. She had seen the fear in their eyes, heard the sneers in their voices. Earth's request for a seat at the table had been rejected with mockery. The Council believed they were nothing, but she knew better. She knew that Earth had been playing nice, that they had been hiding their true strength, waiting, watching, preparing. As the first Aruvian warships dropped into Earth's orbit, the humans scrambled to respond. In the command center deep within Earth's underground military base, General Anders stood at the front of the room, watching the flashing lights on the massive holographic screen. His face was set in a grim mask, but his eyes burned with something far stronger than fear. They burned with resolve. "General, we have incoming," said Lieutenant Rose, her voice sharp with urgency. "Multiple Aruvian warships entering Earth's gravitational field. They're broadcasting on open channels. It looks like they intend to make a statement." General Anders clenched his fists, his knuckles white. "They'll make a mistake," he muttered under his breath. "A big one." The human fleet had long been ready. For years, Earth had been investing everything into defense, secretly building warships, weapons, and technology the Council had no idea existed. The world's most powerful nations had come together in secret, pooling their resources and knowledge into a single, unified goal: survival. The Terran Defense Initiative had been born out of fear, but it had grown into something much more. "Activate the Arcadia," General Anders commanded. At those words, every officer in the room froze. The Arcadia was Earth's crowning achievement. It was a massive warship, larger than anything humanity had ever built. The ship was an ancient design, based on human concepts of battleships, but it had been upgraded, enhanced with technology scavenged from alien wreckage and reverse-engineered to the limit of human ingenuity. It was a symbol of human resilience, a statement to anyone who dared challenge Earth's sovereignty. On the dark side of the moon, hidden from the Aruvian fleet, the Arcadia's engines ignited. Slowly at first, the massive ship began to rise from its secret launch pad, its sleek silhouette emerging from the shadows of Earth's satellite. It was joined by hundreds of smaller ships, fighting vessels built for speed and precision, each one a small but potent weapon. Out in the vastness of space, the Aruvian fleet prepared their first salvo. Earth's defenses had been weak. The Aruvians had expected them to cower, to beg for mercy. But instead, the human fleet met them head-on, engaging with a fury that no one could have anticipated. The first shots from the Aruvian fleet slammed into Earth's atmosphere, sending shockwaves across the planet. But the Arcadia's shields flared brightly, absorbing the energy with ease. The human ship moved forward, cutting through the incoming fire like a knife through butter. From the control room, Lieutenant Rose's voice trembled with excitement. "Their shots aren't even scratching the hull. General, the Arcadia is holding steady. It's stronger than we thought." General Anders nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the battle unfolding before them. "It's not just the Arcadia," he said quietly. "It's us. It's humanity." As the Aruvian ships continued their assault, the human fleet pushed back. The Terran defenders, a network of smaller, faster warships, swarmed the Aruvian fleet like a swarm of angry hornets. With each strike, the humans made their mark, piercing the alien ships with cutting-edge weapons the Aruvians had never seen before. Plasma beams, energy torpedoes, and kinetic projectiles tore through their shields and armor, forcing the Aruvian fleet to falter. But it was the Sigma operatives, human soldiers trained to the peak of human strength and intelligence, who turned the tide. These elite warriors, equipped with personal energy shields and the most advanced weaponry humanity could create, boarded the Eruvian ships. Using their stealth and skill, they infiltrated the enemy vessels, cutting through the Eruvians like a knife through paper. Inside one of the Eruvian warships, Operative Captain John Harris led a team of soldiers through the narrow, dark corridors. The Eruvian soldiers were formidable, their psionic abilities capable of disabling electronics and disrupting weapons, but the humans had prepared for this. Every soldier wore specially designed suits that countered the Eruvians' mental attacks. They fought with a speed and precision that shocked their alien enemies. "We clear?" Captain Harris asked, his voice low and steady. "Clear, sir," came the reply. "They're falling back." With a swift, final strike, the Eruvian ship fell silent. A few final explosions lit up the darkened corridors, but the humans had claimed their victory. Back in orbit, the Arcadia was doing its part. As the human fleet engaged the Eruvian forces, the Arcadia opened fire with devastating force, its main guns tearing through enemy ships with unimaginable power. The energy from its cannons lit up the void of space like a second sun, the shockwaves rippling outwards, sending enemy warships into disarray. The Eruvian commander, Admiral Tharek, watched in disbelief as his flagship's shields failed for the third time. The humans were supposed to be weak, easy to crush. But they were. They were relentless. His fleet was retreating, unable to stand up to the onslaught of human firepower. "What is this?" Admiral Tharek muttered, his voice thick with panic. How are they doing this?" He looked at the view screen where the human fleet was swarming like a pack of wolves. The humans weren't just defending, they were hunting. And for the first time in his long life, Admiral Tharek felt something he had never known: fear. The battle lasted for hours, but by the time the Eruvian fleet withdrew, Earth had won. It wasn't a victory just of technology or numbers, it was a victory of spirit. The human fleet had been outmatched in terms of sheer size, but they fought with a passion and a determination that the Eruvians could not comprehend. They fought not just for survival, but for something far greater: the right to exist as equals in the galaxy. Captain Hawk stood at the helm of the Arcadia, her eyes focused on the retreating enemy fleet. Her heart still pounded from the adrenaline, but she couldn't suppress the pride swelling in her chest. Earth had made its mark. The Eruvians had come to show humanity their place, but instead, humanity had shown them just how wrong they were. She turned to General Anders, who had joined her on the bridge. His face was grim, but there was something else there too: respect. "We've sent a message," she said, her voice steady. General Anders nodded. "Yes, Captain, we've sent a message to the galaxy. One that they would never forget." As the Eruvian fleet retreated into the depths of space, the Council had to face the reality of what had just occurred. The humans had not been weak. They had not been harmless. They had been holding back, playing nice. And now, the galaxy would learn just how far humanity could go when pushed to the edge. The Eruvian fleet limped back into the deep void of space, leaving behind the shattered remnants of their once mighty force. But their retreat wasn't just a flight from the battlefield. It was a retreat from a crushing reality. The humans had struck back harder than anyone could have imagined. And now, in the depths of space, the Eruvians and the rest of the galaxy's ruling powers were left to grapple with a single, undeniable truth: Earth was no longer just a small, insignificant planet. Back on Earth, the victory was celebrated, but there was no time to rest. General Anders stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the holographic screen that displayed the vastness of the solar system. A fleet of ships had come to Earth's defense, and now the human fleet was standing guard at the edge of their homeworld. But this was only the beginning. The Arcadia, Earth's pride, hung in orbit above Earth like a silent sentinel. Its massive form loomed over the planet, a reminder of the power humanity had summoned in the face of impossible odds. But despite the victory, the human leaders knew the galaxy wasn't finished with them. Not yet. A message flashed across the command center's screens, causing a murmur of unease. The Council had finally made its decision. General Anders read the message aloud, his voice grim. "The Council is sending its full fleet. They intend to discipline Earth for its actions." A cold shiver ran down Captain Rachel Hawk's spine as she heard those words. She had known it was coming. The galaxy's rulers, those who had mocked them, underestimated them, and dismissed them, would not let this stand. The Aruvians may have been beaten, but the Tijar, the Esthal, and the rest of the Council's races had not been challenged in centuries. They would not tolerate a species that dared to defy them. Not for long. "General, do we have enough firepower to hold them off?" Captain Hawk asked, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed the tension rising inside her. General Anders met her gaze, his expression determined but somber. "We have what we need. The Terran Defense Initiative has prepared for this, but it won't be easy." The human fleet gathered around Earth's orbit like a protective shield. The Arcadia stood at the heart of the formation, its powerful weapons humming in anticipation. It wasn't just a battleship, it was a symbol of humanity's refusal to bow down. But as the enemy fleets began to arrive, a sense of dread settled over the humans. The first of the Council fleets arrived in a blinding flash of light. 1,000 ships, massive, incomprehensible vessels of unimaginable power, slid into orbit around Earth, blocking out the stars. The sight was breathtaking and terrifying. From the distance, it looked like a storm had descended upon Earth, an endless tide of metal and energy. Ships the size of mountains, their weapons brimming with power, surrounded the human defenses. The air crackled with the tension of the moment. The humans were facing an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for eons, an enemy that had wiped out entire civilizations without a second thought. Now Earth stood alone. General Anders stood before the bridge's viewport, his eyes locked on the approaching Council ships. His voice was calm, but there was a fire in his heart. "This is it. No more running, no more hiding. We stand and fight." The first shot came without warning. A blinding bolt of energy tore through the space between the enemy fleet and Earth, sending shockwaves that shook the human ships to their core. The Arcadia's shields flared brightly, absorbing the blast with a groan, but it held steady. The humans had prepared for this moment. "Return fire," Captain Hawk commanded, her voice cold and unyielding. "Let them know Earth doesn't back down." The Arcadia fired, and then the Terran defenders unleashed their full might. Plasma cannons and railguns blazed to life, sending volleys of energy and solid projectiles tearing through the dark expanse of space. The human ships moved with deadly precision, dodging enemy fire and retaliating with everything they had. One by one, the Council ships exploded into showers of light, their once gleaming hulls torn apart by the sheer force of humanity's retaliation. The human fleet was small compared to the vast might of the Council, but each human ship fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal. The Tijar fleet was the first to feel the weight of humanity's power. Their living ships, made of sentient biomaterials, cracked and ruptured under the relentless assault from the Arcadia. Despite their biological fortitude, they couldn't withstand the barrage from Earth's advanced weaponry. One ship, an enormous living warship, split in two, its screams echoing through the void as it was torn apart. But the Council's forces weren't about to retreat. They regrouped, charging forward with renewed determination. It was a battle for survival, one side determined to prove their dominance, and the other fighting for their very existence. As the battle raged on, Captain Hawk led the Sigma operatives into the heart of the enemy formation. She knew that in the chaos of battle, it was the ground war that would tip the scales. The human soldiers boarded the enemy ships with relentless focus, cutting through alien defenses and planting explosives deep within their hulls. Each operative moved with precision, their every action synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance of death. One by one, the Tijar and Aruvian ships fell silent as the operatives tore through them, sabotaging their weapons and disabling their engines. The humans were everywhere, fighting with the same spirit they had shown on their homeworld, not yielding, not faltering. Back on Earth, General Anders watched the battle unfold, his heart heavy with the weight of it all. The humans had fought before. They had survived wars, famines, and catastrophes, but this was different. This wasn't just about survival. This was about their place in the galaxy. This was about the future of humanity. "I won't let them take our home," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "Not without a fight." The human fleet held its ground, but the Council wasn't giving up. They had the numbers, the experience, and the firepower. They launched wave after wave of ships, trying to overwhelm the humans with sheer force. It was an unstoppable tide, or so they thought. From the bridge of the Arcadia, Captain Hawk issued the final command. "Full power to the main guns," she ordered. "All remaining shots now." The Arcadia's massive cannons powered up, their energy crackling through the ship. As the Council fleet charged forward, the Arcadia fired. A beam of concentrated energy, brighter than a star, shot out, tearing through the enemy lines with devastating force. The shockwave rattled Earth itself. The Council fleet faltered. Ships that were once mighty were now reduced to fragments of metal and fire, their once impenetrable shields useless against the fury of Earth's firepower. As the last of the enemy ships exploded into dust, silence descended. The battle was over. The Battle of Saul would go down in history as a turning point for humanity. The Council had been defeated, its forces broken, its arrogance shattered. But the victory came at a cost. The human fleet was battered, its ships scarred and damaged, and many brave soldiers had given their lives in defense of Earth. Yet as the smoke cleared, one thing was unmistakably clear. Earth was no longer a planet to be ignored. Humanity had stood against the might of the galaxy's most powerful forces and won. Now the galaxy would have to reckon with Earth. And they would never forget the price of underestimating humanity again. The silence that followed the Battle of Saul was as deafening as the roar of battle itself. The galaxy, which had been watching from afar, could not believe what had just happened. The Council, the most powerful alliance of species ever to exist, had been defeated by humanity. The Eruvians, the Tijar, and the Esthal, races that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, were reeling from a loss they could not have imagined. Admiral Tharek of the Eruvian fleet sat alone in his war room, staring at the hollow projection of Earth's solar system. The image showed the remnants of his fleet, scattered across the vastness of space, broken and destroyed. It had been a slaughter. The humans, those fragile, insignificant creatures, had done the unthinkable. They had fought with the fury of a cornered animal, and now the Council would have to deal with the consequences. "Impossible," Tharek muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. "This cannot be. How did they do that?" He turned to his officers, their faces grim. Tell me what happened out there. How did we lose?" One of his subordinates, his face pale, spoke up. "Admiral, their ships, those Terran warships, were far stronger than we anticipated. Their technology, we thought we were the superior force, but their weapons, they ripped through us like we were nothing. And those soldiers, the humans who boarded our ships, they were relentless." "Relentless," Tharek repeated, his voice trembling. He had never felt fear like this in his long years of service. "But they are only human. They cannot possibly be a threat to us." "But they are," the officer replied, his voice shaking. "They are a real threat." Back on Earth, the victory was met with celebrations, but there was no time to rest. The humans had won a battle, yes, but the war was far from over. The Council had made its decision. Earth had defied their power, and that would not go unanswered. General Anders stood in the command center, staring at the holographic display of the galaxy. The human fleet was spread out across the solar system, now acting as both a shield and a warning to any who dared approach. But he knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The Council would come again, and next time they would come with everything they had. The message from the Council had come through a few hours ago, delivered with all the arrogance and disdain they had shown before. Earth was to be punished for its insolence. The full might of the galaxy's fleets would descend upon them to remind them of their place. "We've made a mistake," General Anders said quietly, his voice filled with heavy resolve. "We've angered the galaxy, and now we'll pay the price." Captain Hawk stood beside him, her face hardened with determination. "We've already paid the price, General, but it won't be the last. Earth will stand no matter what." But even as they spoke, the truth was clear. The Council wasn't going to stop, not until they had made an example out of Earth. In the heart of the Council chambers, the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful species convened. The tension was palpable as the members of the Council gathered around the long, shimmering table, their faces drawn and tense. The once confident Eruvian High Speaker was now a shadow of himself, his tentacles twitching nervously as he spoke. "They are a threat," the High Speaker said, his voice unsteady. "We underestimated them, yes, but we cannot let them stand. The humans have humiliated us. They've shown that they are capable of more than we believed possible." The Esthal leader, a being of pure thought and energy, hovered in the center of the room, its voice like a whisper in the minds of all present. "Their technology is unlike anything we have seen. We have underestimated them at every turn. But the humans have only scratched the surface. If we do not deal with them now, we risk losing everything." "We must make an example of them," the Tijar representative said, his deep voice filled with venom. "We must break them, destroy their fleet, and remind them who rules the galaxy. Only then will they understand their place." A murmur of agreement spread across the table, and the High Speaker nodded grimly. "We cannot allow this to go unanswered. Send the full fleet. Destroy Earth. We will show them the price of defiance." As the Council made its decision, Earth prepared for the inevitable. The message had been received. The galaxy was coming for them. The Council was sending the largest fleet ever assembled to wipe Earth from the stars. The humans had no illusions about the odds. They had been lucky before, but luck would only get them so far. Captain Hawk stood before her crew, her expression stern but resolute. "We've faced impossible odds before," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "And we've won. We're not going to let them take us without a fight. We'll stand together and we'll make them remember that Earth doesn't fall." The crew responded with a silent nod, each one knowing the gravity of the situation. They had just defeated the Council's fleet once, but the second wave would be far more devastating. Humanity's resolve would be tested like never before. A few days later, the Council's fleet arrived, an overwhelming force like a black storm cloud consuming the heavens. The ships were massive, their dark hulls blotting out the stars, a display of raw power and intent. Thousands of ships, all converging on Earth. The very sight of them made the air feel heavy, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. General Anders watched the fleet approach, his heart pounding in his chest. The human fleet was far smaller, its ships scarred from the first battle, but they were ready. They had no choice. "We are outnumbered," Lieutenant Rose said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's no way we can hold them off for long." "We don't need to hold them off forever," General Anders replied, his voice tight with determination. "We just need to make them pay for every inch of space they take. We'll bleed them. We'll make them regret coming here." Captain Hawk's voice cut through the tension. "General, the Eruvians are leading the charge. They've learned from the last battle. This time they'll be prepared for us." "Then we'll be ready for them," Anders said. "No more surprises. This time we fight with everything we have." The battle that followed was the fiercest humanity had ever faced. The Eruvian fleet, along with the full strength of the Tijar and Esthal forces, descended upon Earth with the fury of 1,000 storms. Their weapons tore through the void, blasting away at Earth's defenses. But the humans fought back with every ounce of strength and courage they had. The Arcadia opened fire first, its massive guns blazing. The Terran defenders, agile and fast, darted between the enemy ships, their energy shields flashing as they dodged incoming fire. Human soldiers boarded enemy vessels, tearing them apart from the inside. Yet, despite their best efforts, the tide seemed to be turning against them. The Council's fleets were relentless, and they adapted quickly. The humans' firepower was impressive, but it was not enough to overcome the sheer numbers and firepower of their enemies. General Anders stood at the front of the command center, his mind racing. Earth's survival depended on this battle. They could not afford to lose. But the humans had one thing the Council didn't understand, the will to fight, and that would be their greatest weapon yet. The human fleet had fought with everything they had, but the relentless assault from the Council's overwhelming forces seemed to have no end. The Arcadia was battered, its once pristine hull now marked with scorch marks from the endless barrage of enemy fire. The Terran defenders, though swift and deadly, were being whittled down, each ship falling to the superior numbers of the Council's forces. For the first time, General Anders felt a creeping doubt. Would Earth's resistance be enough? Would their defiance be crushed under the weight of the galaxy's might? From his station in the command center, General Anders gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. "Report," he ordered, his voice tight with tension. Lieutenant Rose, her face pale but determined, spoke quickly. "General, the Eruvians are advancing through the outer defenses. We've lost several ships. The Arcadia is holding its ground, but we can't keep this up much longer. Our fleet is outgunned." "And the rest of the Council fleets?" Anders asked, his voice sharp. "They're pushing toward Earth. The Tijar and Esthal have formed a wall around our defense perimeter. We're boxed in," Lieutenant Rose said, her eyes flickering to the screen that showed the vast array of alien ships closing in. "At this rate, we'll be overwhelmed." General Anders exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. For a moment he thought back to everything that had led to this moment, the years of preparation, the countless sacrifices. Earth was not going to fall today. "Activate the secondary fleet," he ordered, his voice cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. "Prepare for full counterattack. We're not backing down." Captain Hawk stood on the bridge of the Arcadia, her hands gripping the console in front of her, eyes locked on the viewscreen. The sight before her was a nightmare. The enemy was everywhere. The Arcadia was alone in the center of the battlefield, surrounded by the enemy fleets, their massive ships blocking out the stars. Despite the odds, she could feel the fire of determination burning within her. Humanity had faced worse, and yet they had never backed down. She turned to the crew around her, their faces just as grim but resolute. "We've fought this far, we've survived this long, but this is our moment," she said, her voice firm. "We are not going to lose today, not while I'm in command, not while this ship still stands." The crew nodded, a collective spark of defiance igniting within them. They had come to this point together, and together they would finish it. "Captain, incoming message from General Anders," Lieutenant Davis said, his voice crackling over the comms. "Put it through," Hawk said, her voice calm. The image of General Anders flickered to life on the screen. He looked weary, battle-worn, but there was no doubt in his eyes. "Captain, you know what you need to do," he said simply. Hawk nodded. "Yes, sir." "I don't care how impossible it seems," Anders continued, his voice firm, "but we cannot let them take Earth. Fight like your lives depend on it, because they do. Humanity has already shown the galaxy what we're made of. Now we show them what we're capable of." The transmission ended, and silence filled the bridge. Captain Hawk took a deep breath. "All right, listen up. We've got one shot at this. We're going to make it count." The human fleet had been pushed back to Earth's orbit, the very heart of their defenses. But now Captain Hawk knew it was time to go on the offensive. The Arcadia wasn't just a battleship, it was a symbol of everything humanity had fought for, and now it would be their weapon. "Engage the secondary weapons," Hawk ordered, her voice cutting through the tension. "Full power to the main cannons, we're breaking through this line." The Arcadia's guns hummed to life. Massive energy cannons, capable of wiping entire fleets from existence, roared as they fired, cutting through the enemy ships with destructive power. The beam of light that shot from the Arcadia was brighter than 1,000 suns, a blinding force that tore through the alien vessels like paper. One by one, the enemy ships disintegrated, their shields no match for the raw fury of humanity's technology. "Focus fire on the Eruvian flagship," Hawk commanded, her voice unwavering. "We take down their command, we cripple them." The Arcadia fired again, the blast hitting the Eruvian flagship square in its core. The massive ship groaned, its shields flickering, before the explosion ripped through its hull. The flagship was shattered, its broken pieces floating in space, a clear message to the Council. But there was no time to celebrate. The battle was far from over. On Earth, the people watched in awe as the fight raged above them. Every nation had put aside their differences to watch this moment. The Terran Defense Initiative had been humanity's last chance, and they had seized it. Now, as Earth's warships held the line, as the Arcadia blasted the enemy forces into oblivion, the entire world held its breath. It wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about survival. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity was not weak, that they had the will to fight, the strength to win. Back in space, the Arcadia continued to battle, its hull scarred but unbroken. The remaining Council fleets regrouped, but they could feel it. Something had shifted. The humans were no longer fighting as desperate survivors, they were fighting as conquerors. The Eruvians, Tijar, and Esthal were no longer sure of their victory, and that doubt was all the Arcadia needed. Captain Hawk stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes focused on the battle unfolding before her. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about humanity's future. It was about sending a message to the galaxy: we are here to stay. No one would ever again underestimate Earth. "Captain, the enemy is retreating," Lieutenant Rose said, her voice filled with disbelief. "They're pulling back there." "We've done it," Hawk whispered, more to herself than anyone else. But even as the retreating Council fleet scattered, the victory felt hollow. The humans had won, but at what cost? General Anders stood at the command center, his face etched with exhaustion. He watched the battle play out, his heart heavy with pride and sorrow. The Council had been defeated. Earth had stood its ground. But the cost had been great. Many ships had been lost. Many lives had been sacrificed. "We've won," Lieutenant Rose said, her voice shaking with emotion. "We actually did it." Anders nodded slowly. "Yes, we won, but it's only the beginning." As the final remnants of the Council fleet disappeared into the depths of space, Earth's defenses stood victorious. Humanity had faced the full wrath of the galaxy's might, and they had emerged stronger. The Council had been defeated, their fleets broken and scattered. Earth had proven something no one had believed possible. That even in the face of impossible odds, humanity would never back down. The galaxy would remember this day, and they would remember Earth. The quiet after the storm was always the hardest to bear. As the Council's fleet retreated into the vast emptiness of space, the human forces stood vigilant in the silence of victory. The enemy's ships, once massive and terrifying, were now scattered fragments drifting across the stars, their arrogance and might shattered. But for the humans, the battle wasn't over. Their victory felt hollow in the face of the sacrifices they had made. They had won the battle, but they hadn't won peace. On Earth, the world's nations had come together in the wake of the battle, celebrating their survival but knowing that this victory had come at a great cost. Families had lost loved ones. Cities had been leveled by the relentless bombardment. The Earth itself bore scars from the war, yet through it all, humanity had proven something that no one could deny. They were not weak. They were not small. They were strong. General Anders stood in the command center, staring at the large holographic map of the solar system. Earth's defenses had held. The Arcadia and the Terran fleet had survived, but the price was clear. Ships were missing. The wounded were many. The battle had been brutal, and now, with the Council fleet retreating, there was a brief moment of quiet, a fleeting chance to breathe. Yet there was something in the air, a weight, an uncertainty that loomed over them all. "General, incoming transmission from the Council," Lieutenant Rose said, her voice steady but filled with a silent dread. Anders' heart sank. He knew what this meant. The Council had lost, but their pride wouldn't let them accept it. "Put it through," he said, his voice hard. The screen flickered, and the face of the Aruvian high speaker appeared, his expression dark, his many tentacles twitching with a barely contained fury. "General Anders," the high speaker began, his voice cold, "the Council has reconsidered its position." Anders felt a chill creep down his spine. He had known this moment would come. The victory had been too costly, too final. The Council would not allow such an affront to their authority to go unpunished. "We have received your message," the high speaker continued, his voice thick with barely suppressed rage. "And though we acknowledge your victory, however temporary, it has not gone unnoticed. This will not stand. Earth will pay for this." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The high speaker's words hung in the air like a death sentence. General Anders stood motionless, his mind racing. He turned slowly to Captain Hawk, who had entered the room with a quiet step. Her face was drawn, her eyes tired but fierce. "They're coming again," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I know," Anders replied, his voice heavy. "They won't forget this. They'll send everything they have. The Council can't tolerate a species that has dared to challenge them." Captain Hawk's gaze hardened. "And we won't back down, not now, not ever." Across Earth, a grim realization was spreading. The victory of the past few days had been momentous, but the galaxy's rulers had not forgotten their humiliation. The Council had been bruised, but their pride was a beast that would not stay down for long. Humanity, despite its triumph, was on the verge of something worse than before. They were about to face the full wrath of a galaxy that would stop at nothing to erase them. The message had been clear. This was not over. The world's leaders convened in secret, the sense of urgency pressing down on them like a storm. Earth had shown the galaxy its strength, but could it withstand the fury of the Council's true might? Could the human race survive another assault, or would they be crushed under the weight of the galaxy's wrath? As the leaders of Earth spoke in urgent, quiet tones, the people of Earth could only wait. The victory of the Battle of Sol had lifted their spirits, but deep down, they knew the Council would return. And when they did, Earth's resistance would be tested like never before. Out in space, the remaining forces of the Terran Defense Initiative worked tirelessly to repair the damaged ships and fortify their defenses. The Arcadia floated in orbit, a battered but unyielding symbol of humanity's resolve. Its hull was scarred, its systems strained, but it was still operational. Captain Hawk stood at the helm of the ship, her hands clenched at her sides. She could feel the weight of her decisions, the burden of command pressing on her every moment. They had won, yes, but they were not safe. The Council was coming again, and this time they would not make the mistake of underestimating humanity. "Captain, our sensors are picking up massive energy signatures," Lieutenant Rose called from the console. "It's them. The Council's fleet is reassembling. They're coming back, full force." Hawk's jaw clenched, her heart hammering in her chest. She had expected this, but the reality still hit like a punch. The enemy's arrogance had not been broken, it had only been delayed. She turned to the bridge crew, meeting each of their eyes with a steady gaze. "This is it," she said, her voice calm but filled with the raw fire of resolve. "We fight, we stand firm, and we make them understand what happens when they try to crush us. We're not going to let them take our home." The crew nodded in silent agreement. They had already proven their strength. Now they would prove their unbreakable will. Across the stars, the Council's fleet was already on the move. The Aruvians, the Tijar, and the Esthal, ancient powers that had once ruled the galaxy with unchallenged might, had been forced to admit something they had never believed possible. Earth had fought back, and humanity had won. But the Council could not afford to let this victory go unpunished. Earth's defiance was an insult to the galactic order they had carefully maintained for millennia, and they would not allow it to stand. The Arcadia, Earth's symbol of strength, was now the target of their rage. The full might of the galaxy's greatest forces would descend upon Earth, determined to break the human spirit and prove that no species, no matter how brave, no matter how fierce, could stand against the might of the galaxy. But the humans, for all their fears and doubts, would not bow. They had fought against impossible odds before, and they had won. The Council may have underestimated them once, but never again. As the human forces prepared for what could be their final stand, one thing was certain: Earth would never go down without a fight. They had already shown the galaxy their strength. Now they would show them their defiance. And in the end, the galaxy would know that humanity had earned its place among the stars. No one would ever forget Earth. And no one would ever underestimate them again. The stars outside Earth's orbit were quiet, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. The galaxy's most powerful forces were coming, every ship, every weapon, every warrior the Council could muster. The remnants of their fleets had been patched up, and they were ready for their final strike. This time they would not fail. This time they would break humanity's spirit. Earth would fall. The Council had decreed it, and nothing would stop them. On Earth, however, there was no panic. The people of Earth were not afraid. They had already faced the full fury of the galaxy and survived. They had fought back, and they had won. But this was different. This was the Council's last chance to maintain its dominance, and they would stop at nothing. General Anders stood in the command center, staring at the holographic map that displayed the massive approaching fleet. The Arcadia and the Terran fleet stood ready, but the numbers were against them. The Council was bringing everything they had. His mind raced through strategies, but even he knew the odds were slim. "We can't win this by strength alone," he muttered under his breath. "We need to outsmart them. We need to make them believe they've already won." Captain Hawk walked into the room, her face determined. "We've done it before," she said, meeting Anders' gaze. "We can do it again." "Not like this," he replied quietly. "This is their final push. They won't make the same mistake twice. They'll come at us with everything." She stood beside him, looking at the same holographic projection. "Then we fight with everything we have. If we go down as the species that dared to challenge them." Anders met her eyes. "This time we don't just defend, we make them regret ever underestimating us." The Arcadia was a symbol of humanity's will, a ship scarred by battle but standing strong, ready for the final confrontation. Inside the bridge, Captain Hawk's voice was steady but filled with urgency. "All hands to battle stations," she ordered. "Activate all secondary systems, prepare for the worst." Her crew moved swiftly, their faces set in grim determination. They had done this before, and now, with the galaxy's greatest powers bearing down on them, it was time to prove once more that humanity would never be defeated. "Captain, the enemy fleet is entering the solar system," Lieutenant Rose called out, her voice sharp with tension. "They're closing fast. We estimate the first wave will reach Earth in 20 minutes. "Make sure every ship is in position," Hawk replied. "We fight as one." General Anders' voice came over the comms. "Captain, this is it. We can't hold them all off forever, but if we can buy enough time for Earth to prepare, we'll give humanity a fighting chance. Get ready." The Arcadia fired up its engines, the massive warship drifting away from Earth's surface. The human fleet followed, each ship moving into formation. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and exhausted from the previous battles, but they would fight as if the fate of the galaxy depended on it. And to them, it did. The Council fleet arrived in force. Thousands of ships, their weapons primed and ready, filled the sky, blocking out the stars. The Aruvian flagship led the charge, its massive form gliding silently through space. Behind it, the Tijar and Esthal fleets followed, their ships appearing like dark clouds descending on a defenseless world. As the enemy forces approached, the Arcadia's shields flared to life, glowing with energy. Every ship in the human fleet powered up, their weapons systems ready to strike. General Anders gave the order, "Open fire." The Arcadia fired first. Its main cannons unleashed a blast of energy so bright it momentarily illuminated the entire solar system. The shockwave rippled outward, tearing through the enemy fleet. The first wave of enemy ships, unable to react in time, were destroyed in a flash. Explosions lit up the darkness as the Arcadia and the human fleet opened fire, their weapons slamming into the Council's ships with everything they had. But the enemy was prepared this time. The first wave was only the beginning. The Council's ships regrouped, their shields pulsing with new energy. They returned fire and the human fleet took the brunt of the assault. The Arcadia shook under the impact, but its shields held steady. Captain Hawk's grip tightened on the command console as her ship swerved to avoid a direct hit. "We can't keep this up for long," she said, her voice tense. "We need to get them to chase us." General Anders' voice came through once more, calm but filled with an unspoken urgency. "Do it. Lead them away from Earth." Hawk nodded. "All ships break formation. We're pulling them away from Earth. Stay tight, stay fast." The human fleet scattered, moving as one to create a decoy. The Arcadia led the charge, weaving through the enemy ships, drawing their fire, forcing them to chase. The Council's ships followed, eager to finish what they had started. On Earth, the civilians watched from their homes, anxiously staring at the skies, waiting for the inevitable. But they weren't afraid. For the first time in their history, humanity stood united. The sound of air raid sirens echoed across the cities, but the people didn't hide. They gathered together, watching as their warriors fought above them. In the heart of the United Earth Government's Central Command, the world's leaders watched the battle unfold. The fate of Earth was in the hands of the Arcadia and its crew. They couldn't control the outcome, but they could support those fighting above. The human fleet drew the Council forces further out, towards the asteroid belt, where the gravity wells of the distant planets could help slow down the enemy. It was a desperate plan, one that relied on Earth's strategic knowledge of the system. The Arcadia and the Terran defenders used the belt's debris to their advantage, weaving through the asteroids, striking quickly and disappearing into the cover of space rocks. Every moment was critical. "We're losing ships," Lieutenant Rose shouted. "We can't keep this up forever." "We don't need to keep it up forever," Captain Hawk replied, her voice steady. "We just need to hold on long enough." The human fleet continued its harrying tactics, drawing the enemy deeper into the asteroid field. Then, at the most crucial moment, the humans sprung their trap. The Arcadia opened fire once again, but this time, the blast was different. It was a concentrated EMP pulse, one designed to disrupt the Council's advanced weapon systems. The result was immediate and devastating. The first wave of enemy ships lost power, their weapons failing. The Arcadia and the human fleet surged forward, using the confusion to land blow after blow. It was the break they needed. The Arcadia's firepower, combined with the Terran defenders' lightning-fast strikes, began to turn the tide. The Council's fleet, already strained from the previous battles, was losing control. Ships exploded in flashes of light, their advanced technology no match for humanity's perseverance. As the final wave of enemy ships fell, the humans stood victorious once again. The Council fleet, shattered and broken, was forced to retreat, scattering into the darkness. The remaining Aruvian ships limped away, their once-proud commanders humbled by the power of humanity's resolve. Captain Hawk stood on the bridge of the Arcadia, watching as the enemy fleet vanished. Her heart was still pounding, her hands still gripping the console, but the fear that had gripped her before was gone. They had done it. They had beaten the Council. General Anders' voice echoed over the comms. "We did it, Captain. Earth is safe." Hawk looked out at the stars, her heart swelling with pride. "No, we did it. Earth did it. Humanity did it." And as the remnants of the Council's fleet disappeared into the void, one truth became clear. Earth was no longer just a planet in the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, and from this day forward, no one would ever dare to underestimate humanity again. The galaxy had learned its lesson.